items to the committee for deliberation and action. Clearly, by bringing an ordinance to this committee, that is his intent. The chair has last month not forwarded the information to the committee, and now this month the chair is using the agenda as a method to remove that right, not only from Supervisor Cooper, but also to remove the voting rights of the members of this committee and the rights of this committee to make motions on an item. And and that is being based on a fictitious rule that says that the members of this committee cannot make motions or vote on something unless the word action is in the agenda item. I'm not changing the content of the agenda item. What I'm changing is I'm addressing the abuse of power that the chair is using to withhold the authority of duly elected members of this committee. That can be the only intent in omitting the word action from this agenda item. Furthermore, Robert's Rules requires the chair to be impartial when bringing things to a committee on the agenda. And clearly the chair is not doing that. The chair is intentionally using the agenda to restrict the voting rights and the ability for this committee to make motions on Supervisor Cooper's request.
First of all, in response to that, I have no objection, or have any objection, to keep this from coming forward another time. I obviously did not notice that act was on that line item. Maybe I was published, and I apologize for that. I have no objection to keeping Supervisor Cooper's presentation from the committee or the floor to vote on in any which way. However, from my understanding from clerk, that we cannot change it today because of the fact that the rate is published.
There is no statute or county rule that states that.
What about the law? Like
I
what's
said
not
statute.
open meetings laws?
No,
You can violate them?
that's not a violation of open meetings law.
Well, we have to
I'm
post
not
the-
changing.
You have to post
Not
the agenda 24 hours before the meeting.
Right.
And but we have act on there.
Like I said,
We were discussing it, but we can't act on it today.
that's the point. That's the point of misconduct and abuse of power by the chair.
Well, that was not my
Yeah, I'm not gonna roll down the road of breaking open meetings laws, so I would vote against that.
Well, I made my appeal, so if the chair is gonna not act on my appeal, then I guess that's just another example of misconduct.
I don't. Go ahead.
I have been in contact with court counsel regarding this issue, and he indicated the Wisconsin Court of Appeals has noted that Wisconsin statute 19.84 sub 2 does not expressly require that the notice indicate whether a meeting will be purely deliberative or if action will be taken. The Buzzwell decision infers
just heard, that is not part of their act. It's a loose opinion by one attorney group.
Well, I believe the attorneys are probably smarter than I am in regards to these matters. So I follow the direction of the attorneys.
Which means you disregard an appeal too?
That's the point, Josh.
Well, since my rights are being violated by your disregarding of an appeal, I would move that the chair vacate the seat and Chairman Amo assume duties as chair of this committee.
And you have to, up to the committee, if the committee step down, if you want to do it.
I don't know, I think Cindy raises a point that we won't meet the local county board until March. So we can actually discuss this today and act on it, but
Well, I agree, we could do, we could just only discuss, but it doesn't address my appeal. The chair has refused to restate my appeal. Which shows the intent.
well, it's either that or an oversight. I mean, they said that he did not intentionally exclude it from the agenda, they just forgot
Well,
to act on there.
it seems really strange to me. I mean, are we ready to act on the contract of law enforcement item? The next one? I don't remember seeing an updated contract. Can't be ready to act on that as a committee. That says act.
As I stated before, I did not intentionally leave that off of that line item. I looked at, I reviewed the meeting agenda, and I apologize for that. I have no intentions of keeping anything that Supervisor Cooper once brought forward, or anything that you would like to have brought forward. However, I again apologize for overlooking that item, but unfortunately at this point in time, according to the attorneys, that's not much I can do about it. So, your statement, you want me to step down, I'll ask the committee for me to step down.
We have a motion on the floor.
The motion well, the original motion was to amend the agenda. And the appeal was for that original motion, which I'm saying that the chair has to take action on the appeal.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor made by Bill to amend the agenda. Is there a second to it?
I second it.
Seconded by Russ. All in favor, voice vote, Russ,
Yes.
Ron,
No.
Bill,
Yes.
No.
and I'll say no. Okay, let's go on. Next meeting date, February 19, 2026 at 9 a.m. Is that okay with everybody?
Yeah.
Approved LEC minutes from December 2025.
I'll move to approve.
A motion made by Bill, seconded by Ron to approve the minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Discuss resolution creating ordinance 5.11 inmate housing cost
Thank you, Chair. I guess the reason that I propose it is that for the past year and a half, it's kind of been a main topic of discussion on what our costs are per inmate per day. I've watched members of this committee ask repeatedly for the formula used to calculate what our daily inmate costs are. That's how we create budgets, that's how we create policies, is based off from having information that's fed to the committees in a consistent manner. We even went to the point of saying, could we get samples from other counties on how their jail formulas are, and the response that the committee got was, I'm not sure other counties want to know. Well, I guess I disagree with that from an oversight perspective, because we need to know what our costs are in order to justify making changes, improvements, remodeling, building. We actually need to know what our costs are. So what I did is I sat down with that question and I created a formula based off from everything from how the federal government calculates their formulas, how State Department of Corrections calculates their formulas. And I understand and realize, and I don't want to confuse the two, there is a huge difference between a federal institution and a local county jail. However, the way that you calculate the costs are the same. Whether it's here or whether it's in a federal institution, you need to know what your costs are. In the proposal that I put forward to you, it's not complex. A lot of the charges keep in mind that this is an average daily inmate cost, right? So we don't need to know the exact penny of what it is day to day from the Sheriff's Department. That would be overburdensome to the Sheriff's Department to have to do that every day. 90% of the stuff in the formula that I've submitted are basically fixed charges. We know what our insurance is going to be for the building. We know approximately how our utilities run per month for the building. We know what our labor costs are. Variable with overtime, that could be a variable. Our inmate numbers would affect it. Whether we have a high inmate cost or a low inmate cost, that would affect it. So that would be something that would need to be monitored closely. And then our meal count. The rest of it basically is a fixed number that we know at the beginning of the year that, there may be some oddities of some major breakdown or something, but we're going to all know about that through property or report from the sheriff or the chief that, hey, this broke and it's going to cost us $20,000 to fix that. That would be a variable that would need to be taken into consideration, but we would know that at the time. So I'm not soliciting or trying to tell the sheriff in any way, shape, or form what to do. I'm just saying that this is a way for oversight to get accurate numbers with a consistent formula from year to year to year, and how we calculate inmate costs. What is their fully loaded cost? Because there's a lot of things that we don't think about. We don't think about that there's payroll time. We don't think about that, we have Rick's time in it. And, a lot of times, with Nick and Evan and everybody put in a lot of overtime to help out in shortages in the jail or extreme overtime in the jail due to one reason or another. We just need a consistent formula. It's not about whether I'm not saying that we need to control the sheriff's choice on whether there's overtime or not overtime. That's not our job. Our job is to get a consistent report to us that gives us an average cost, a true reflection of what it costs us for average inmate costs. And, I proposed this to the committee. It's certainly subject to change. It is merely that. It's a proposal. I know that Cindy has looked at it and found some duplications that I had put into it and reduced that down in her work to, make it consistent with formatting to the county, and all good. All good. The committee can make changes to it. Say, no, I don't think we should calculate this one this Part X into our calculation or not. It is just a proposal to try and get a formula that we use consistently, so the numbers are fixed. We're comparing apples to apples, and not apples to oranges or bananas. That's kind of the summary of it, Chair.
I guess I got one.
Sure.
You listed here on Wisconsin State Statute 59.52, parent 30. If you look it up on the website, if you look it up on the state statutes, it talks about limitations on performance of highway work.
And typographical error, Max, I'm sorry.
Okay, all right, because you listed it a number of times. You had suggested it requires the board to annually adopt a budget, and even anywhere in chapter 59.52, it doesn't talk about anything about budget. So, I think before February, we want to have that change.
Sure. Yep.
Bill, I'd be curious, the March 15th date that you specify here, what are you basing that on?
I just picked a date, Bill. It's not locked into anything. It's just a proposal. And that's the whole purpose, is that I don't want to give anybody the impression that, and thank you, Max, for catching those, I don't have all the answers. I can just make a proposal, and together, as a committee and as a board, we, including the Sheriff's Department command staff, we make adjustments to it to make it work for us. And if there are errors in it, let's fix them.
So how would this compare to a policy? I mean, if we want to change a policy, we don't have to go through as much.
Ordinances are much stronger than policies, and I propose it as an ordinance. It just gives the importance of us having accurate information in order to make educated decisions when we get into budget process of what those numbers are. We do not control the policies of the Sheriff's Department. We approve them, but the sheriff decides day-to-day operations. I don't think that we should create a separate policy that attempts to govern the sheriff, because the sheriff's constitutional authority is very clear that he manages day-to-day operations. This is from our side of things as oversight on what we need to measure. And I just think that it would be potentially not helpful to have it as a policy, Ron. If we put it in as an ordinance, it becomes more solid from our end, and it avoids any appearance of conflict with interference with the sheriff's constitutional authority. You know, it's very clear, supported by the Constitution and the Supreme Court and a lot of lower court rulings, that the sheriff runs the day-to-day operations of the jail. There's no question whatsoever. All I'm asking for is the formula for oversight, with the corrected statutes, Max, thank you, on how we get that information. Will it become heavily burdensome? That first time will be kind of clunky because we're gathering numbers that we're not used to gathering, but it's already known numbers. It's just collecting it into one point, and you guys get to see it in a report once a month. Maybe it's because we're shorthanded and the sheriff needs more help, so that we would be able to adjust that then and give him help. Maybe he needs better tools. But it would be an indicator to us as oversight, your committee first, and then moving up through the food chain, that adjustments need to be made.
Trying to think, what month is it that we normally update our charges for the jail? And what we fee schedule, I guess, is what I'm looking for. Does this fit in with that at all? So, this report,
I don't know that number, I don't know that off the top of my head.
I'm trying to remember when
it's a good idea. And the reason I say that is because it gives us a bedrock as to what we can go and base decisions on, like Tom was saying, down the road. When it comes to budgets and, there's a lot of different things that can go here and there, but at least we would have a basis, let's say just data, but a basis that we can look at from month to month, from year to year, to say exactly what's going on as far as the basic budget, basic amount of money that's keeping these, that's being spent on a person inside this jail. We're not talking about, other stuff, like Tom was saying, there's gonna be other factors that might come involved, but what I think is this real good idea is to have a line, a baseline that we can look at and say, okay, so this is what it cost us, and then all of a sudden we can take a look at these other things that are coming from outside, the other environmental things that might affect it. And like I said, that doesn't go in at all interject as a committee, into the functions of the sheriff and his people there. But I think this is a real good basis. I think this is a good idea. That's my opinion.
Any of you?
Captain Gray, how do you guys budget now? You guys set a jail budget, like when you guys presented your budget for 26, how did you set that?
This particular time, I rely heavily on the sheriff.
Okay.
I'm still learning the budgeting process, so I would favor you're looking at your known costs and things of that nature, and then you're doing your anticipated costs based on past history. And then you'd also, I try to have the foresight to project what it would look like in the future.
You'd say one of the largest variables is population count. So, you have your fixed expenses of your, you have your fixed expense on your salaries and your heating and electric and stuff like that. Whether you have one inmate or you have 50 inmates, those prices stay the same because you have to have 3 posts on patrol or whatever. But say if we were to have a surge to 65 inmates population, that would definitely go to the budget, right? Because you'd have your variables, you'd have your housing, you have higher medical costs, higher food costs, maybe just a little more overtime. So like one of the biggest variables in your budgeting, so we can gather this data, talk about, say the cost is $106 a day to house an inmate, and you do your budget off of that. Do you budget off of that, off of 65 beds, what you have, or, I just wonder if we're getting too much into minutia of budgeting, because you're gonna see that the larger your population, the more money you're gonna spend, and so I think historically you guys can just use past data, historical data where you're at, but if we were to have a couple of years where you surge a population of 65 to 70, we would have a lot of money spent, right?
Well, I think certainly, if you increase the population, you're going to increase things like your costs for housing, your costs for meals, your medication, those things. I don't think that's pretty clear. As far as how that compares to the budget, I think you take a look at what would the max exposure be versus what is a realistic exposure. If you try and find a responsible spot in the middle, because I don't think you intentionally want to inflate a budget number just to do it.
Right.
But I do think you need to be cognizant of that max exposure, so that you understand that yes, if you did have this number, then this could happen, and you don't want to come back halfway through the year and say we dramatically under budgeted because we didn't look at that possible exposure.
So I think this tool that's being presented would help with budgeting, but it certainly isn't your budget number. Like, I wouldn't use that as the gospel that, hey, we're gonna use this data, average daily population, or average daily cost per inmate, because your inmate population changes every day, and as it goes up, your costs per inmate go down, but if you have a surge, you're gonna definitely see a lot of higher costs. So the main goal here is to lower the overall jail costs. I think that's what we're trying to accomplish, and I think we want some reimbursement, but the state tells them what the reimbursements, right? Yeah. So we can tell them, they're gonna say, okay, here's what we're gonna give you. But I think your overall goal is to try to lower the overall jail costs, right? Save money, taxpayer dollars. Is that the goal of this, to lower the jail expenses?
Yeah, the goal is to have a formula in place so we get accurate information. So, like the question is how is it that Trumbull County houses our inmates for $50 a day. And our costs are the last number I got was $69.77 a day. Okay, so we have that big difference. And then we have statutorily from the reimbursements from the state, a maximum of $51.46 per day, depending on which box that the agent checks on it. Some of it's reimbursable, some of it's not reimbursable. So we may be getting zero for holding a state inmate. But we really need to know what our actual costs are in a consistent formula to tell us that. And then how do we take that accurate information then and use that for leverage towards the state or maybe other services? Maybe we use that as leverage in our MOU to negotiate a meal contract with Jackson Correctional, which is allowed. And it just helps us, gives us a better insight, Max, and gives us a solid base to work off versus just responding to a state employee or the public saying, we don't really know what that number is, we just kind of guess. But it gives us a solid foundation with that. And in regards to inmate fluctuation, we know that we run a 3-post system, so that's a predictable cost. The only thing that would be is if we go over in numbers and we have to go to overtime, then overtime is going to affect that daily inmate cost. But we really relatively know pretty solid that we run a 3-post system in our jail. We know that we have an assistant and a captain in the jail. We know what those fixed costs are. And we can use this formula to calculate that to give us accurate information.
What about grant funds? So, like we get I don't want to call them grant funds. I think it's opioid lawsuit dollars. When we're a county that's unique in using those, I don't know if every other county uses them. We have that therapy. And this ran through as an expense. Do you account for I'm going to call them grant dollars, probably inappropriate to call them that, but the opioid funds that we get from the state, would you count those as an expense?
You could use part of that to offset your cost and bring it down and use that as part of your metrics, saying that we were able to reduce costs by using opiate funding. I mean, opiate funding has a lot of restrictions to it on what we can and what we can't do to it, but there are administrative costs and physical costs and stuff that we can take out of the opiate grant funding. For a perfect example would be the prescription med trade cart or whatever. So without opiate grant funding, that would cost us $6,000 or $7,000 out of levy dollars to buy that. Well, Kalen was able to work it through there, and that is an approved expenditure by DHS for us to purchase that for overall jail benefit, not just for the opiate grant. That benefits everything, and it was something that we needed. So yes, we can use revenue sources to say that we were able to reduce our overall inmate costs by utilizing 15% grant funding through opiate. And then you just list that in the report, so we know that for budgetary period, at some point in time, opiate grant funding will be gone. And that way we don't build a non-sustainable system that the minute that grant funding is gone, now it all becomes levy dollars. I'm not sure that we can afford to do that. But it would tell us along the way the huge benefit that we're receiving from the opiate grant fund dollars.
So the formula shows total annual jail operating expenses. We probably should change that to net annual, because when you have total, that doesn't account for the grant funding. So you'd have to roll that out. When it comes in as an income, then it comes as an expense. When it shows up as an expense, you want to roll that out. And I'm sure we get some revenue from your canteen or whatever. Yeah, so we'd have to roll the revenue into that too. So obviously we operate at a loss. We operate at a multi-million-dollar loss every year, but you want to kind of roll that stuff out. And you can have some variabilities from year to year. Like if you have an average daily population of 23 one year, you can have the same expenses, the same numerator, from 4 years in a row. But if your population changes significantly, say from 23 up to 53, but your expenses stay the same, you can have a much different number because your denominator would be larger. Then you have a lower daily population. I think this is some good data. I don't know if it needs to be an ordinance, but I think this would be interesting to have to develop some trend lines and use it as a tool for budgeting, not the tool for budgeting. But I think some data that I think we'll be able to get. We can do it But that's just where I sit on it. But I think it's good data to have, but not the gospel. So.
I think that, you know, you could look at the history of population that we had in this jail, and you can kind of come up with a, you know, let's say right now we've got 23, like you said, you got 23, and all of a sudden, the year's been at 53, and you're like 30 over, you know? And now it's like, uh-oh. But I think that what you could do would take a look at the history of population, like go back 3 or 4 years, and come up with that figure and add like 15 to be, the cushion would be on the safe side. And that way, this would be considered part of the ordinance. In other words, whatever you got, you could add 15 or even, you know, 30% or 40% more just in case. Because the other thing too is that you guys know that med prices change, and everything kind of changes, you know. So what I was thinking is that, you know, you could turn around, put this ordinance in, but then add a cushion onto it as to what you want to take a look at. So right now you have 23 people, but all of a sudden, you know, 4 years ago we had 53 at one point. So you could just add a percentage. Go ahead, Tom.
Russ, I agree with you. I just want to caution the committee that we just need the raw data.
Right.
How the sheriff presents his budget, or Nick presents the budget at budget time every year, that's up to them, how they present it to us, and we control what we're going to approve. So if the committee decides that, you know, these are the actual numbers that it cost us to have an inmate in the jail over an average period, you know, and like Max says, this is not the gospel. It's only a tool, and it's only one tool for one part of operations. So, but putting a revision into it that says that, oh, we're automatically going to add 15 or 10% or whatever, I don't think that's oversight's responsibility. I think that's the sheriff's.
Okay.
I think that's the sheriff's goal on operations of this jail. We just want the raw data so we can say, yep, absolutely, we need to increase the sheriff's budget by this amount of money, or maybe we need to decrease it by this amount of money. But at least gives us a consistent tool to measure, you know, like Max says, to give us those numerators that both can go forward and backward, you know, with algorithm. But there's a lot of variable costs that are going to come up, and there's stuff that you know, Nick and Evan and Dwayne, they can't control it. In Kalen, they can't. There's certain things that they can't control. Much like us in DHA such, we don't know when we're going to have an expensive long-term placement. The sheriff doesn't know when he's going to have a high-cost inmate, and that affects our costs. So there needs to be flexibility in it. But my thing is to keep it focused on a basic formula on how we calculate what our inmate costs are. Not to tell the sheriff what he's got to do with his budget or anything. We just need the raw data so we can make, when the sheriff says I need to increase my budget by 15% because my inmate costs, as you've seen, have increased because of X, Y, and Z. And we look at it and say, yeah, the data's here. You're right, sheriff. You can't keep operating at a loss. We need to increase your jail budget by 15% in order to cover that cost. But at least we have the data to look at in a consistent format.
So we're looking at bedrock data, like a baseline.
Yep. The only variables would be the amount of inmates and your food costs, basically, over time. But I mean, as you know, if we're consistently running, say, I don't think this is ever going to be realistic, but say we consistently run 12 inmates as our daily average population. Do we need a 3-post system then? If we consistently average only 12 inmates for a month on end or for an entire year, do we need a 3-post system? No. But there is statutory mandates that we do need a 3-post system if we break certain levels, and that level is unknown to us. So yes, a 3-post system is exactly what we should have right now. So, but it just gives us a consistent formula. And that was, but my goal and intent was to create a formula present it to you, up for debate, change it, command staff says, nope, this doesn't count as part of it, or you guys want to see something additional to it. It's just a base point for us to start a discussion on calculating that formula. And Max, I'm really glad that you went through it and, found errors. I don't pretend to be perfect. That's why I submit them as proposals and not a final product.
Tom, what would you recommend as being the timeline for this? Once a month, give an accurate report on what the costs are, or once a year?
I think it would be easy enough for it to come to you at once a month, because like I said, 90% of it is going to be fixed charges. They're not going to change. We've already paid our insurance premium. We know what our average electric bill is, and the key thing is not to get stuck in those that huge list of calculations, because they're already known charges. They're not going to change from month to month. It's only one or two categories that would change month to month that would show you up or down. That's it, because the rest of it stays the same. So it's not a complicated calculation. We have to, by law, know how many inmates we have in the jail anyway. We have to report it. So we already know what the number of inmates are. The staff call in and order to Perkins every morning on how many meals they need, for the day, and we know what that cost is. But it is an average over 30 days, not the cost that day. So once a month, I think that would be my best thought, Garth, to answer that question would be, I think monthly, just send it through in a divisional report. Doesn't need to be anything complicated, just a one line that says fully loaded average daily inmate cost is this. Next month it might look different. Month prior to it could look different. It has so many variables because of medical and emergency dental and all that stuff would come in as a variable, but already information that we're tracking. We're not asking for anything new. We're just asking it to be reported in a consistent format.
From what I'm understanding, I may be wrong, but this sounds like an accounting issue. And the sheriff's department doesn't have any accountants on their staff that buys it for you. Cindy's office calculates the final numbers for the month on the budget lines. Is this something that your office should be looking at and see if there has to be additional lines added to the budget report for your office to come up with a calculation of that?
We send our reports to every department monthly, and the sheriff's department, what they present to you is their form. It's not my form. So they have the figures from our office. I'm not sure what else I could provide to them.
Sheriff on there? Sheriff, right here?
I am.
Do you have any comments or items that you'd like to bring forward in regards to this?
I do. First is that all the stats and the raw data are available and reconciled monthly or through the year and not housed at our sheriff's office. We have a draft or computation that we use through the weeks and the months to do our management of the office. So to get the true numbers would have to come through a different official records keeper, and that information is available anytime. Like Max said, you can have this calculated whenever you want, how you see fit. The other part of that is that to require the sheriff to do a specific report out is unconstitutional. I'm not required to put a report together for you guys to understand the role of budgeting. I get to manage, like Tom said, the jail and other operations of the sheriff's office. So again, I just revert back to the fact that the sheriff's role is to do the operations and use the funds that are set aside for the sheriff's office throughout the year. As for your knowledge on how things are being spent falls into a different accounting or finance department, and that information's been there the whole time. And you can get it whenever you want, however you feel the report should be drafted. It doesn't require an ordinance to make the sheriff's officer's designees do a report for the committee That's a finance issue and it's a budget issue that if you guys want to know the cost, it's housed and reconciled at a different office as an official record.
Questions for the sheriff? Okay. Carry it over till next month's meeting for action. Meantime, have any other ideas that come forward, bring forth at next month's meeting? Okay, let's move on. Contracted law enforcement. Discuss that. Sheriff, did you want to talk on that, contracted?
I can follow through on that contract. Emails were sent out. I know it was brought up as an LE committee concern. It didn't seem to be the same concern at the village level, but we have dialogue on the issue about the wording and terms end of the contract. We are working through that, as well as the goal is to put a side letter agreement together through 2006 to further our services with the villages, and so far everybody's on the same page, but I've only got one response as to the side letter itself. So it's really limited what we can do today as action like was brought up, but I wanted to report out that this is in the process of getting corrected. Verbally, nothing should change, and as we work through 2026 into the year 2027, the goal is to have a different wording, or at least an updated contract presented in front of the committee, as well as for potential signature, or it could go the other way, and if there's customers or the villages itself want to step away, they can at that time. But I can report out that it looks to be we're going to continue with the services as well as what's going on today verbally, and then of course the sequence of every 30-day meeting, getting it through the meetings, etc., to make sure it meets our needs, goes through corp council, etc. So there's some work to do, but our services are continuing in the village verbally up to this point, and we'll report out more next month.
Questions?
Bill? Is there any recommendations that the sheriff's making right now to the villages as far as altering what the enforcement should be for the villages? I guess another way of putting the question is this model that we've used now for 3 years of contracting the sheriff to do support, law enforcement support, court support, is it working? And is there any data being shared with the villages to say, yeah, it's working, or no, we need to make adjustments?
We give out, and yeah, I did. We give out monthly reports to the villages, so they assess our the work that's been completed. They also work very directly with the person, providing that service. So there's really nothing more for us to recommend or to move into the village's discussion other than hearing what they have and if it's met their needs. And why I say it that way is that this contract is an ordinance enforcement type contract. The law enforcement generally over services to the community does not stop. We continue to do services of law enforcement for the entire county. This extends us the ability to do ordinance enforcement based on the needs of the villages. So I think if we have to go with what they're saying, if it's meeting their needs, the day, the times of day, etc. And that's what's unique about these contracts. You're working with that government authority to find out if it is, if some want more or less. So that's fluid. And I think the better answer to that, Bill, is it really depends on how they're receiving it. At times, I'm sure they're frustrated, and we work through it. And sometimes, things go well, and sometimes we don't have staffing. So it's fluid, and it's got variables. But ours is to continue to give them the opportunity for service and see if it falls within their budgetary guidance on those issues. So that's the goal.
Any other questions? Well, at this point, Sheriff, you're not requesting us to take any action on this, just to carry it over?
Right, there's no action needed today. I get that it says that, but really it's early and we have to meet the villages, so I'll present again next month.
Okay, let's move on. Discuss and act PSAP forms. Captain?
So for chapter 3, under the grants, I obtained 2 grant quotes for the computer program for Next Gen 911 software. And another company's called Logicom. I'm also working on getting a second quote for the furniture for the dispatch center. That falls within the, it's up to $150,000 expenditures. So I've got one quote in from Dick Bus, which he sells Watson furniture. And I'm waiting on Evans Furniture, which is also, not also, but they sell, it's not Zybex, it's a different type of furniture, but it's meant for dispatch centers and communication centers. And I expect about 2 weeks before I can get that second quote. So I don't have all of the quotes just yet, but I anticipate having it by next month to present for the city.
Well, aren't you con what we have now?
I know we have Callworks right now. Callworks. Sure, Callworks and Vesta are also owned by Motorola. There are different systems. The benefit of going with Vesta or even Logicom that has the next gen 911 capabilities, and also the reason why there are PSAP grants allowed or offered are for texting to 911. And some other upgrades, I guess. But that is the big push nationally is to Next Gen 911. We're working very close with AT&T. They're not free of charge, but essentially without charging us, they're also upgrading some of the equipment to accommodate for Next Gen 911. So it seems like other counties, we're probably one of the last counties in the state that haven't moved towards this. So it's what should kind of where we go in the end. These other software companies be able to get us there.
Any other questions? No need for any action on this at this point. Okay, discuss and act Taser project resolution.
That is me. Since the last time I met with you, I found out in my research there was an oversight, and I wanted to bring it back to you because it's a significant cost difference. And the oversight is this, is that in my research and talking with the company and everything else, I was under the impression that we could no longer get the model, the X26P, which is a model we have some of at our agency right now. It is an older model. It is their oldest model that they still sell right now, but the key word is they still sell it right now. And they do sell it with a warranty that would get us through the next 5 years. And so what this would allow us to do is if we went that route, we could get this entire project done for sure under $75,000, as opposed to if we went the other route with the Taser 10s, you're in excess of $200,000 over the 5 years. So before we made that commitment, I wanted to bring it back and talk to the committee here. I do not have a resolution today to act upon today because there was no way it was going to make it before the 24th of March anyway. And the thought process was, if your wish is for me to continue with the 10s and with research, then there's already a resolution that was suspended at executive finance and personnel in the last meeting. But I think that it would be irresponsible for me not bring this back and say, hey, I missed this, but there's an opportunity for us to meet our needs for the next 5 years, 3 to 5 years, at a lower cost. And I'm just trying to be responsible about this. So I think this would meet our needs. You got to know though that there is a chance that they could stop purchasing stuff that does exist. But the way I looked at it as recently as last night, they're sold out of these now. They're expecting that they can ship more around the 23rd of this month. And I think that they're going to continue to have these to meet our needs for the next 3 to 5 years. I know it's going to get us through at least till we can get to a position to be more prepared for that larger expense. And this is a good way to bridge the gap if we move this route. And our staff is already trained on this, so this would be more of a way of being cost efficient and getting the product into their hand that would make their job safer now. But I'm open to discussion of what you want to do there. If we do go this route, you got to know that to get this job done here, based on what was budgeted for this year and then proceed see for the next 5 years. The amount that I would come back for in the resolution to ask for would be higher than what was suggested before. But it's a one and done type deal. I mean, we're still gonna have to, in the future, as we move forward, look at budgeting to make sure we have batteries and cartridges and things like that, but you're not looking to replace all these units all at one time.
Any questions? Bill?
I just appreciate the chief bringing this up. And I think one of the things that I considered heavily in this was the fact that you would be using, two different types and the training involved with that. So, I mean, I would support the chief's proposal to just stay with the 10.
X1, super easy.
Yeah, whatever you have right now.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut it off.
Anything else? Okay, carry that over to the next month when you bring your resolution.
I will bring a resolution back.
Okay, divisional reports, they're all on your iPad. Anything that you or the sheriff like to bring out, there are divisional reports.
The only thing that I'll add is that, yesterday I was trying to do too much at once, and I submitted the first, emergency management report, and that's why you're gonna see an amended one. It's just, I hit send before I guess I was ready to. The information is very similar, but that's why you saw that. That was an error on my part, and I apologize for that. But can't take it back, it's what happened, so.
Well, I have a question, Lena. So, in the way we're working this in the all files right now, I've run into a couple of situations where I've gone in, thought I've reviewed everything, and then something else has popped up, later in the day or in the evening. Is there some way that we can know that, hey, everything's posted that we need to look at, or can we put a deadline time that as a committee, we know that for sure everything is posted? Because I ran into that situation, I think, 2 meetings ago, where I came into the meeting and there was stuff that had been posted after I reviewed the night even before, so. It would just be helpful to know that, yeah, everything's posted, that needs to be posted at school.
I post items as I receive them,
Right.
and I guess I don't necessarily know if this is the last document. I don't think it's the last document, but I'm not sure.
I understand what you're asking, I understand why you're asking it. I mean, I think, I don't have an objection to come and say to you, or if you'd like me to send it out. I don't want to create a walking forum where if I send it out to all of you at once or something, but I can send it out to you that I don't have anything else to add, so that we know that it's in. I'm a little bit apprehensive to put a hard line rule of always and nevers, because there's always extenuating circumstances, right? I wouldn't want to have it like that, but I think as a general practice, I understand what you're asking, and I don't think it's unreasonable. And the other thing too the suggestions, if there's a certain way that you want that communicated.
If you just want to send out, I'd be happy to just send an email that everything's posted. So we check it. That's one way to do it. I mean, this is a good, this example, agenda's a good example. There's a number of items on here, you know, like for the resolution that we were potentially looking for, would have, but didn't have, so it would be good to have that confirmation.
So Nick, if you let me know, because I'm the one that does the actual posting, so I would hate him to send out an email that says everything's posted, I haven't posted it yet, so.
That's fair. I
If
can let-
you can let me know that this is it, but I usually get everything from Amy, so whomever can say this is it, then I can shoot something out.
We can work on that a little bit.
I did. I just want to remind the committee that, in the county, that we still have not made a decision on our hazardous mitigation plan that now expires in February. It takes a long time to write that. I don't think that's a task that Nick wants to take on with all of his additional duties, is because it's quite detailed and it involves a lot of additional municipalities that need to have addendums, because we all filed under with the state for FEMA funding in the event that we would have disasters. We have to have that plan in place. And a proposal has been made by Mississippi Regional Planning to do it, and was it 10? 8 or 10,000?
What was more than that, but
I don't remember off the top of my head, but it is really something that, you know, it was under emergency management. Jack was going to write it, and obviously that's not going to happen. And it's very long bathroom reading type material, so it's tedious and it's long, and I just don't think it's fair to try and say, hey Nick, we need you, along with everything else you're doing, we need you to get this hazardous mitigation plan done by next month's meeting. There is a carryover, so in the event that we would have a natural disaster, we would still be eligible for federal funding, as long as we can show that we were in process of getting our hazardous mitigation plan updated. So, not that it's an agenda item, but it does fall under the emergency management issue, and at some point in time, we need to make a recommendation either to have Nick write it or to contract it out with Mississippi, who does them all the time. But it is something that does need to be addressed, so thank you.
well, Nick and I have talked about this. You got information that indicated we should put the brakes on.
Well, couple things. I do want to respect that it's not on the agenda, so I'm not trying to dodge this, but I have been working on this. And so there are a lot of variables to consider. So I have not just been sitting idle with it or anything like that. I have been in contact with the state on it, and there are a number of things to consider. I agree that it needs to be done. I'm not in any way, shape, or form saying it doesn't, but I do think that it needs to be discussed more and calculated how you want to do it, because it's all about the financing of this thing and what that impact means for us, depending on which route we go. So my suggestion would be, before we get into it too much, bring it back as an agenda item so it can be openly discussed and there's no concerns there. But I don't disagree that it needs to be remedied.
Not on this agenda, so you would have it on next agenda, or do you want something special to meet some timelines, or?
I think the next agenda will be fine. That's my perspective.
Meeting members? Sure, put it on next agenda. Okay, anything else on divisional reports? Staffing, vacancies, and recruitment updates.
With that, we currently have one full-time position that's open in the jail for a female position. We're in backgrounds on that. We've done the interviews on that, so we're in backgrounds and working our way through that. The patrol side of the house, there's that contract position that's still in the full-time slot
Just the, yes, Monday I'm really hopeful for. We'll have an EM on board. And then the admin, the records position. So Chief Deputy is working with Gina. I think I reported out in the executive meeting that we've had some really great success as of late with applications coming in and people having a lot of interest with our positions here at Jackson County. That position actually has 26 applications, which back in the day probably wouldn't have sounded like much, but now in the world that we live in, that's a good sign. So.
Yes, I forgot that. There's definitely a lot of interest on that. We're at the point where we need to whittle that down to get to a reasonable number of applicants and move forward.
How are we coming on our rec services position?
Our rep services.
Yeah, our rec officer for the county.
There's been, Deputy Kaiser's been appointed to that position.
Thanks.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, discuss and act, vouchers, payable, and budget review. Any questions on the vouchers payable?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion made by Max to approve the vouchers. Need a second? I'll second. Seconded by Bill. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Any questions on the budget review?
Do we, you guys have, so right now you guys came in 200,000 on your budget for 25, like is there anybody hanging out there in the weeds, or, I don't know, like how that works?
I don't know if there's anything monster costs still coming in. I think we're just letting those end-of-year expenses come in. I think we're gonna be close. But no, I'm not foreseeing anything, massive that's gonna blow that up a lot, so to speak.
Well, let's say 200,000 on it isn't bad, given all the overtime you guys had this year and everything.
I think we're gonna be closer.
Okay. That's been a hard year, you guys had a lot of overtime, so that really adds up fast.
Any other questions about the budget?
Yeah, based on, top overtime on the 26 budget, or just in the first pay period, the budget shows about $3,000 in overtime, which is where if you could give me some perspective on that. I'm not surprised to see a little